What's going on, good people? Welcome back to another episode of Trading My Funded Account. Today is October the 25th, 2023. We made some trades today, so let's get into it. So let's talk about our important levels that we have on the chart today, and we have yesterday's closing price represented by this purple line right here at 33,266. Now this level will play a major factor and pretty much played a very important role in the only trade that I took today. So let's go ahead and get into it and talk about trade number one. So at trade number one, I shorted here after prices broke through a previous higher low and then came back to retest it. So that right there is the textbook version that I want to use when it comes to the higher low strategy when I'm looking for a short trade entry. So let's break down this trade and actually talk about how it formed and what signals I saw that gave me the go ahead and confirmation to take this trade. So when we opened the market, we were in a consolidation range right here between 360 and 320. So we bounced back and forth between these levels for a good amount of time, but we eventually came out of this entire area after forming a double top. So we had top one and then we had top two right here. So then after that, we had a very strong move to the downside that broke past this consolidation zone. So notice the volume candle right here. Notice how this volume candle comes right after we touched the top of the zone for the last time. So that's telling us that for whatever reason, it was a large wave of selling that came in right here once we touched the top of the consolidation zone, and this candle actually brought us all the way back down to the lower levels of the zone. So in one candle, in 1 minute, we went from the top of the zone all the way back to the bottom on high volume. And also take note of how this volume candle is the highest volume candle that we formed since the open. So anytime you have that that second highest volume candle after the market opens at 9:30, that represents an area of significance. So whatever happened on that specific candle is going to be very important. And today we can see that this candle pretty much led to the start of this overall downtrend that we're looking at. So after this candle closed, we saw prices pull all the way back to this midpoint where you could call this a higher low, but not really, because the wicks for this candle did not come back up to retest the highs for that previous red candle. So it was kind of like a almost higher low, but not quite. So we came back up and closed at that midpoint level, and then this very next candle created what you could call a very small lower high, but a lower high nonetheless, because when you pushed all the way down, came back up, and this was the last point where the buyers actually had strength in the market before the sellers started to take over. So after this one candle, we broke past the consolidation zone on a very strong move coming out of that initial high volume candle that we saw. So it makes sense that the sellers came in at the top of the range, sold it all the way down to the bottom, and then continued to break back down past that range. So that's the first signal that tells us that the selling was very strong, right? So the next signal that we see is the fact that prices came from the top of the consolidation range at 360 and then pretty much pushed all the way back down to try and test the yesterday's closing price from 266. But in this scenario, we weren't able to quite get there on the first touch. But what's important is that the sellers showed what they wanted to do and what they were trying to do. So we can see that the sellers were trying to get down to that level, but they couldn't just do it on the first try, because for whatever reason, buyers stepped in, either taking profit or going long. You know, maybe this might have been a longer term support level on a higher time frame. So always remember that it's never guaranteed that prices are going to come directly back down to that price, even if the momentum is moving that way. Because what I've learned in the market is that on moves like this, where it looks so obvious that prices are about to have a 1, 2, 3 candle move down to that major level that you're looking at, a lot of times it just won't play out that way. And as soon as you get in, that's pretty much going to be the exact place where the market reverses and gives you a pullback, and then it continues down to that price. And that's pretty much the scenario that we're looking at on today's session. So we couldn't quite get there, but the fact that we tried was signal number two, that the sellers were in control. So look at how this candle, let's go back to the live chart so we can see the prices real quick. All right, so let's look at this candle again. So this candle, the low for this candle was 277. So we moved all the way down from this low back up to the high of this candle right here, the next one that comes after, which is 325. So within the span of 2 minutes, we moved about 50 points back to the upside on very strong momentum. See how large this candle is? That tells you that momentum is coming in. So what's interesting is the fact that you had all of that momentum that came back and just simply retested the bottom of the consolidation zone that we just broke out of, and then immediately got rejected. So it's a lot to break down in this entire scenario. So first, let's talk about the fact that we got rejected from this level. Now, anytime you break out of a consolidation zone, if the breakout is going to be legit, you have to, well, you don't have to, but like 9 times out of 10, maybe 8 times out of 10, you got to come back, retest that consolidation zone that you just broke out of. So that way we can confirm that the breakout is legit. And once we see that prices come back, retest the consolidation zone we broke out from, and then we get rejected and start moving away to the downside again, that right there confirms that the breakout was legit. And then that's when you can start looking for your short trades. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about when it comes back to retesting this overall area. The second thing I wanted to talk about is how sometimes a higher low can get made on one specific candle. So if we come back down to this low that we made at 277, we pushed all the way up, right? We hit that level, but then on this one candle, look at how we opened at 318 and we had a low of 305. So fell back about 13 points, which is good enough to create a higher low in a situation like this. Now, sometimes the higher low will not be a multi-candle formation like you might have saw over here where it's a 1, 2, 3 candle formation. Sometimes it'll all happen within the same candle if it's a long tail candle wick that closes away from the lows that it made in a very significant way. And that's exactly what we saw right here. So once we push down and then push back up, that right there was the lower high, the higher low. So that's why I went ahead and circled that up and then drew my level of support across it. Now, what's very interesting is the fact that as soon as we made that higher low, we came back up and closed at the resistance level from the bottom of the zone, which makes sense. But look at this next red candle right here. This candle is very significant because of the way that it opened and the way that it moved. So the opening price for this candle was 321. It opened pretty much right at the zone and right on the highs for this candle. But notice how the open price was 321 and so was the high, which means that it opened right there and it dropped for the rest of the time that this candle was forming, and then got to a low of 293 and it closed at 300. So that's telling us that the rejection is definitely legit, because the first thing that we saw that told us that the rejection was legit was the fact that we had all this momentum coming back up into the bottom of the consolidation zone. And despite the buyers having all of that strength, they immediately got rejected. And it was pretty much over for all of the buyers as soon as we got back to that consolidation zone. This one last wick right here was the last hope that the buyers had. But after that, the seller stepped in a major way. So after seeing all of those signs, in addition to the fact that we broke past that higher low and then came back to actually close below it and then came back to retest it, that right there led me to taking trade number 1, because I saw all of the signs that I needed to see that confirmed that the downtrend was in motion. So we had the double top, we had the break of the consolidation zone, we had a successful retest, and then we had a very strong sell-off from the retest followed by a break of a higher low. So everything pretty much lined up for me to go ahead and take the short trade right here. So I was able to get in at around 303 and I took it back down to around 71, which was about 5 points above yesterday's closing price, because me personally, I don't really like to hold the trade all the way back down to the major level. I want to get out in front of it so that I can make sure I lock in my profits. So that was pretty much the only trade I took today. You know, I usually trade a little bit more, but anytime I can come into the session and have a really good trade as my first trade of the day where I get a pretty nice gain, I like to take that momentum, lock it in, and then come back the next day and try and run it back and do it again. So that was pretty much my only trade today. Did pretty well, made 314, traded in 2 contracts, that's $10 a point. So all in all, made 31 points after commission. So not too bad. Made a new equity high today, and I would say overall I did a pretty good job of reading the market. I was patient and I waited for my best moves. So I think going forward, the things that I need to continue to practice on are just trying to come in every single day and only trade those higher lows. I think today I did a good job of avoiding this potential higher low right here because it just wasn't as strong as I thought it should have been. And it came within the first 10 minutes of the market being open. So that was pretty much just a no for me. Like, yeah, I see that higher low, but I don't want to trade it because it's weak and it comes within the first 10 minutes. So I think I did a good job of being disciplined right there. So I need to keep that up and keep that going. And like I said before, just stick to that higher low strategy and only trade the higher lows. It's either going to bounce off of the support level for the higher low and continue moving higher, or it's going to violate that higher low and then come back to retest it, and we'll see the selling continue. So it's like once I see the higher low, it's two ways for me to go about trading it, and I just have to pick whichever method fits the market that I'm looking at right then and there. So those are the things that I need to focus on to continue getting better, continue going forward, so I can continue having days like this. But that's pretty much all I got for you guys today. I hope you learned a lot about using yesterday's closing price and not just getting into a level because you see, well, not just getting into a trade because you see momentum coming towards your level. You always want to make sure that you wait for your setup to form, because sometimes you might see prices coming to that level, and sometimes they'll just go all the way to that level without you. You still got to wait for your setup, and if you don't get your setup, you just don't take it. But on days like today, when you do, you take that trade and you live with the results. So hope you guys were able to learn a lot about that, because I definitely did. I'll be back tomorrow on October 26, 2023, ready to do it again one more time. But until then, you guys have a good one, study hard, and take it easy.